Today I would like to show you how to do a regular bind off. In a pattern, it's usually shown as capital B, capital O, and it'll usually say bind off loosely. Sometimes it'll say, just like casting on, there's many different ways to do it, but if it doesn't specify a particular type of bind off, then it will typically mean this one. So this is how to do a regular bind off. So I have a little piece of knitting here, and I'm going to pretend it's time to bind off. So I'm going to knit one stitch just like you do. I knit continentally, so it's the same maneuver regardless of which way you hold the working yarn. Then I have 2 stitches on my right needle. I'm going to take my left needle and I'm going to put it into that first stitch, and I'm pulling it over the second. Then I'm left with one, like that. Then I'm going to knit into the next stitch like this, so that I'm back to 2. I'm going to take the first stitch and I'm going to pull it over the second like that, leaving me only with 1 stitch still. Now, when you are binding off, not only is it important to do it loosely so that your bind off is nice and relaxed, but it's also much easier to do if you do it loosely. I'll show you what it looks like if your bind off is a little too tight. But the looser it is, the easier it is for you to pull that stitch over. So that typical tension that you use when you're knitting, don't use that kind of tension when you're binding off. Make sure that you are holding the yarn very, very loosely. And sometimes I even pull it a little bit like that so I can get under it and pull it over really easily. And then see how it's showing that nice little chain along the side? That's the bind off, and I could see that I'm doing it like with a nice loose tension. So I'm going to keep going all the way to the end. I'm always going back to 2 stitches, and then I pull the first one over the second every time. Then I'm back to 1. Then I knit another. I'm back to 2. I pull this one over the second. I knit it and pull it over. This one feels a little tight. Pulling it over. I'm going to go all the way until I only have 1 stitch left, and then I'll show you what to do. Knit, pulling it over. Okay, I'm almost to the end of my work. Okay, now I'm to the last stitch. Oops. Last stitch, I'm pulling the first one over the second until I only have 1 stitch left, and I'm going to pull that one out like this, setting my needle aside. I have that big loop right here, so I'm going to go ahead and break my yarn. And I could pull it right through like this. And I just want it to be as tight as I can. And I could go ahead and just work it my ends in. So there's my bind off. That is a regular bind off. And I just wanted to show you, I did one here, like with my typical tension, and see how right here, the edge, like instead of going straight, it kind of comes in. Because it's kind of like tugging on the work and it's kind of rigid there. So, so just make sure that when you bind off, you do it nice and loose so that the edge of it is kind of relaxed, kind of elastic, and it looks really pretty too. That's a regular traditional bind off.